Today, we're going to talk about one of the most incredible figures in all of ancient history, Mithradates VI. This was a king so tough, so smart, and so obsessed with poison that he became the Roman Republic's absolute worst nightmare for decades.
So who exactly was this guy? Well, it really depends on who you asked. If you were a Roman, he was this monster who just refused to be beaten. But if you were from Anatolia, you might have called him the Holy Father, a liberator. And if you're a doctor, you know him as the founder of toxicology. Talk about a complicated legacy, right?
And here he is. This is Mithradates. He was born back in 134 BC in a city called Sinope. His kingdom, Pontus, was right there on the Black Sea, and it was living under this ever-expanding shadow of the Roman Republic, which was just gobbling up territory to the east at an incredible speed.
Now, his journey to becoming king wasn't some simple, peaceful inheritance. Oh no, it was a story of pure survival, forged out in the wilderness and driven by a deep-seated paranoia that, honestly, was completely justified. You know, there's a reason this practice, Mithridatism, is named after him. And the reason is pretty dark. See, his own father was assassinated at a banquet, poisoned. And the culprits? Probably his own mother and her allies at court. This one event kicked off a lifelong obsession. Mithridates started taking tiny, non-lethal doses of poison every single day to build up his immunity. This wasn't just about staying alive. It was about mastering the ultimate weapon of his time.
To make sure he didn't end up like his dad, he literally fled the palace and just disappeared into the wilderness. For 7 years, he lived like a fugitive, always on the move, never sleeping in the same place twice. And while all this was happening, his mother was back home, acting as regent, grooming his younger brother for the throne.
Everyone back at the palace just kind of wrote him off, Oh, he's just some wild kid who loves hunting. But that was his cover. In reality, he was moving from village to village, mastering the art of propaganda and building a secret network of followers right under their noses.
And then, in 120 BC, he decided it was time. He marched right out of the forest, straight back to the capital, and staged a lightning-fast coup. He threw his mother and brother in prison and finally took the crown that should have been his from the very beginning.
So, with his kingdom now locked down, Mithridates set his sights on a much bigger prize, taking on the seemingly unstoppable power of the Roman Republic.
This slide shows you just how brilliant he was at branding. On the left, that's a coin of Alexander the Great. On the right, that's Mithridates' coin. He's Persian, but look, he's deliberately styling himself to look just like Alexander. In a world without social media, coins were your internet. And he was using his to go viral, marketing himself as the next great Greek liberator who would free Anatolia from Roman rule.
And you can see how things escalated. For years, he just kept expanding his empire, taking on legendary fighters like the Scythians and winning. Then, after years of back-and-forth proxy wars, he launches a full-scale invasion in 89 BC and just kicks the Romans completely out of the region. But what he did a year later, that was something else entirely.
At his absolute peak, which you can see on this map, his empire was massive. And in many cities, he was welcomed as a hero, a savior who was freeing them from Rome's notoriously corrupt tax collectors and governors. People were thrilled to see him. But this liberation came with an absolutely horrific price tag. In a single coordinated event that historians call the Ephesian Vespers, Mithridates sent out secret orders across all his territories, and on one day, his supporters rose up and murdered every single Roman man, woman, and child they could get their hands on. The estimated death toll, as high as 100,000 people. A massacre on that scale? There was only one way Rome was going to respond. Furious and out for blood, they sent their most brutal, most feared general to hunt him down. Lucius Cornelius Sulla. The real war was just getting started. For almost 40 years, Mithridates seemed like he was invincible. He'd lose a battle, but he'd always find a way to come roaring back. But Rome's sheer persistence, combined with the ultimate betrayal, would finally bring him down.
This wasn't just one war. It was basically a generational conflict. Rome just kept throwing its best guys at him, one after another. First Sulla, who managed to push him back. Then Lucullus, who took the fight even deeper. And finally, they sent in Pompey the Great to finish the job once and for all.
And it was Pompey, the guy you see here, who finally broke Mithridates' armies for good. After a string of crushing defeats, the old king had to flee for his life.
His last hope was a small kingdom up in the Crimea, which was ruled by his own son, a guy named Pharnaces.
And this is just so crucial. Think about it. After fighting the most powerful republic on Earth for 40 years, it wasn't a Roman soldier who finally defeated him. It was his own son. Pharnaces basically saw that his dad was a lost cause, and, hoping to get on Rome's good side, he led a rebellion against him.
So now he's trapped, maybe 70 years old, cornered by his own son's army with absolutely nowhere to go. The old king decides there's only one way out. And this leads to one of the most unbelievable, ironic endings in all of ancient history.
He knew exactly what would happen if he was captured. They'd drag him to Rome in chains, parade him through the streets in a massive triumph, kind of like the poor guy in this illustration, and then they'd publicly execute him. There was no way he was going to let that happen. He'd rather die.
So, being Mithradates, he pulls out a vial of a super strong poison he always carried with him, and he drinks it. He waits for the end to come, and nothing happens. Absolutely nothing. Why didn't it work?
The answer, amazingly, was his entire life's work. All those decades he spent taking little bits of poison, building up his immunity, it had worked too well. His body had become the perfect antidote. The Poison King could not be killed by poison.
In the end, in one last tragic twist, the man who had terrified Rome for a generation had to turn to his bodyguard and basically order the guy to run him through with his sword. It was the only way left.
And what happened to his treacherous son, Pharnaces? Well, his betrayal got him pretty much nothing. Years later, he tried to retake his father's old kingdom, but he ran into a new Roman general on the scene, some guy named Julius Caesar. The battle was over so fast that Caesar famously described it with the words on this coin, Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered.
But in the end, Mithradates earned something that lasts longer than any kingdom, the genuine respect of his enemies. Years after he was gone, the famous Roman orator Cicero wrote this, calling him the most formidable king Rome had ever fought. What a perfect final tribute to the one and only Poison King of Pontus.